Hey everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter. Today I'm excited to share a few different card projects with you featuring the new Painted Faith die from Simon Says Stamp. This is a part of their new My Favorite release, which is being released today, and I wanted to give you a few options for combining it with some previous stamp sets. This is the Sending Happy Thoughts stamp set, and this stamp says prayers and love, so you could do faith, prayers, and love. This is the workout stamp set, and this says, I believe in you. So I thought it would be fun to kind of combine it with that to tell somebody that you believe in them, you have faith in them. And finally, I'm going way back here. This is the use stamp set. This stamp says, will do amazing things. So that's what I chose to use on my cards today. So my sentiments will all say, faith will do amazing things. And I think it's really important when you get dies like this to look through some of the products that you may already have to see how you can combine them to make new things. So I'm starting out here with a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock. I trimmed it down about 3/8 of an inch off of both sides, and I'm taping it down here to my craft mat because I want to mark the center of it and I want to keep this very still. So that washi tape is where the center of my watercolor paper is. And now I'm going to use some Distress inks here and I'm just smushing them onto my craft mat, and I'm going to just create some watercolor stripes across this panel of watercolor cardstock. The colors I'm using are Abandoned Coral, Tattered Rose, Worn Lipstick, Scattered Straw, and Cracked Pistachio. And I'm putting them down on my mat in the order that I want the stripes to appear on my watercolor panel. So I'm just smushing those down, and now I have a paintbrush here with just a little bit of water, just kind of mixing a little bit of that water. And I'm going to start with the color that's in the middle, and I'm going to start at the middle of this watercolor cardstock and work out. That will ensure that I get even spacing as I work across this panel. So I started here, this is the Worn Lipstick, and I just created a stripe of color there. And now I'm going to go out from there, so I'm using the Tattered Rose above it, and once again, just mixing it with a little bit of water. I needed a little bit more pigment, so I went back into the pigment there, just creating a swash of color across that. And now I'm going to go to the one just below it, and that is the Scattered Straw, and I'm just creating my watercolor stripe there. And then finally, I'm going to go to the ones at the very top and the very bottom, which are the Abandoned Coral and the Cracked Pistachio. By starting in the middle of this panel, it really made sure that I kept all of my spacing nice and even, and that I have a really nice, good frame on this entire panel. So I love the way those three pinks looked together so much that I decided to go ahead and create another panel. This is just going to be a watercolor background, and I'm starting here with the Tattered Rose in the center and just kind of tapping it on, smushing it around onto my Tim Holtz watercolor cardstock. And then at the top, I'm using the Abandoned Coral, and then finally at the bottom, I'm going to use the Worn Lipstick. And you can see I have no rhyme or reason. I'm just creating kind of a messy watercolor background, and I love the way these three pinks blend together. They're just a beautiful combination. My favorite, and I've not used it before, but that Tattered Rose that's there in the middle, it creates such a beautiful blush pink color. I highly recommend you try that out if you have it on hand. So now that those are set aside and drying, I'm going to go ahead and die cut my Faith sentiment here. This is the Painted Faith die from the new Simon Says Stamp My Favorite release. I die cut it a few times here because I am making a few different cards, and I'm just putting it back into the negative space, and I'm just using a little micropore tape on the back of that to hold it in place. And now I'm grabbing a few strips of the Stick It adhesive, and I'm just going to place it right across the bottom of that Faith sentiment. I'm going to be creating some glitter dipped die cuts for this card, and so I just need a little bit of adhesive right along the bottom, and I wanted it to be a nice straight line, so I didn't use glue in this case. I just used a strip of that Stick It adhesive because I knew I could get a nice tight straight line across the bottom of that sentiment. So once I got that on there, I burnished it on with my bone folder, and then I flipped it over and took off the micropore tape, and I also removed the backer from the front. Now, I may have found a better way to do this when I was doing this a little bit more, and I'll show you that way here in just a minute, but this worked just fine. And then once I had the backer removed and that adhesive exposed, I went ahead and dunked those into some gold glitter that I just have in a little tub here. You know me, I like my gold glitter, right? So I have to keep a tub of it around at all times. Once I got them dipped, I went ahead and put them inside a piece of scratch paper and then just used my bone folder to kind of burnish that down into the adhesive that was on the front of the cardstock. So with a little trial and error, I think I discovered a little bit easier way to do it. Instead of die cutting my sentiments first, this time I'm adding my strip of Stick It adhesive right onto this piece of vellum before I die cut it. I'm going to burnish it on with my bone folder, and then I was able to flip it over and see where I'm placing my die along that line of adhesive. Now, if you aren't using vellum, if you were using regular cardstock, you wouldn't be able to see through it, obviously, but I think this die would be easy enough to line up along that strip of adhesive that you wouldn't have any problem. So once I got it lined up, I went ahead and ran it through my die cut machine, and now I'm going to neutralize that vellum using my EK Success powder tool. Vellum can be pretty staticky, and so I didn't want the glitter to stick above that line of adhesive, so I went ahead and just neutralized it before I removed the backer, and that just kept, extra pieces of that ultrafine glitter from sticking to the top of the vellum. So I went ahead and removed the backer here. I'm dunking it in that same super fine gold glitter again, putting it onto my piece of scrap paper once I get it dunked. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold this up once again and burnish it into that adhesive using my bone folder. Now keep in mind, this is loose glitter, so you may have a little bit of shedding with this technique, but I think it's a really fun technique to try out anyway. Once I was done playing in all that loose glitter, I went ahead and just took a Swiffer sweeper cloth. I've cut this down and I've just wiped up my work surface, and I did remove a little bit of the extra glitter that was on the top of that vellum. And that's just a really easy way to clean up after yourself when you're playing in the super fine glitter that can tend to get all over the place. But it's fun to be, sprinkled with glitter every now and then, right? So now I'm just prepping a piece of vellum here so that I can emboss the rest of my sentiment onto it. I've stamped that "Will Do Amazing Things" in some Versamark ink right on the top of that piece of vellum there. I'm covering it with some superfine detail white embossing powder and then just heat setting that. And then I took it over to my trimmer and just trimmed it down into a little strip, and I'll further trim it down a little bit later. Now I decided I wanted a little dimension behind this Faith die cut, so what I did was I went ahead and used the same die to cut out some fun foam, and I'm just adhering the cardstock piece right over the fun foam piece using a little bit of liquid adhesive, and I used that same Tombow Mono multi-glue to adhere that die cut sentiment onto the front of my watercolor panel there. So now I'm just trimming down this vellum strip here. I'm using these new titanium scissors. They're kind of fun to use. I like the easy action of them. I am still getting used to them, but I do like them. And I'm just cutting that into a banner end on both ends. And I'm using some clear Cool Tack foam adhesive right behind the embossed portion to adhere that right below that die cut sentiment. I decided that the watercolor panel on the front was so pretty with that sentiment adhered over the top that I just wanted to keep the rest of this card really simple. So I'm just going to adhere it onto a regular white card base, but I'm adding a piece of fun foam behind this card front in order to add a little bit of dimension, and then I'll add it onto that A2 card base, and it's a top folding A2 card base. Now for just a little bit of shine on here, I decided to not use some sparkling clear sequins this time. Instead, I'm going to use the clear droplets from Pretty Pink Posh. And when I'm adhering these, I like to use the glossy accents to adhere them on because I feel like the matte behind the glossy of the droplets just doesn't look right. I don't know. So I like to use the glossy accents to adhere those on. And there is my first card. Now for my second card, I'm pretty much using the exact same layout, but I wanted to show you an easy way to position this so that you get your die cut sentiments lined up. I'm just using the negative portion that I cut this die cut from, and I'm just using that to make sure that I get all of my words in line the way that they should be. And then you can use it also for the little tittle over your eye. That is the dot over your eye, just to make sure that it's all in the right place. And then once you get it adhered down, you can remove that negative piece, and then you have your die cut perfectly in place. Once again, I'm just going to adhere this card front onto the card base with a layer of fun foam behind it. And on this card, I went ahead and added the ATG adhesive right to the piece of fun foam. Now, I haven't had good luck with adding adhesive to the fun foam in the past, but I do find that I get better results when I'm using my ATG gun to add the tape runner adhesive directly to the fun foam. And I find I get best results when I add a good amount of pressure and I release the trigger before I pull up on the ATG adhesive gun. It just gives it a little traction and helps it stay onto that fun foam a little bit better. So for this card base, I used the Simon Says Stamp Fog cardstock, and I'm just finishing it off in the same fashion using some more of those Pretty Pink Posh clear droplets. And I just love the softness of that vellum gold dipped faith die cut on this card. So here's a look back at the couple of cards that I created in this video tutorial, and I also have a bonus project over on my blog that you can check out that I created with the same faith sentiment. And I highly encourage you to go on over to the Simon Says Stamp store and check out their entire new My Favorite release. I will have a link to it in the video description here on YouTube. I will also have a link to the entire release over at my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Over at my blog, you'll also find links to all the products used in these projects and some more still shots and more information. As always, I will have links to the featured products in the description at YouTube. Here's a look at that bonus project that I created. Thanks for stopping by today. I really hope you enjoyed these projects. And until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.